Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce and another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond compare.
Jetzt kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von hinten an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!
Welcome back to another episode of Dortmund Dispatch. We're doing something a little bit different today. This is a bit of a spotlight episode, and I guess for the first time running this, I'm joined by Pedro and Joey. How's it going, guys?
I'm doing good, not so bad. Just a little bit of a stressful week, a lot of work to do. Dortmund hasn't been helping a lot, but a decent performance in the midweek against Barcelona. At least we can take that in, and hopefully when everyone's back healthy again and we have a little bit of a better luck, maybe we'll be a better position this season. But besides that, I'm all good.
Well, good to hear. What about you, Joey?
Yeah, I mean, really can't complain other than wishing we could have gotten a point out of that match yesterday. But I am feeling a bit relieved that it sounds like Nico Schlotterbeck's injury is not as severe as that landing made it look. So,
That looked bad, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm thankful that and confident that he'll be fit and ready to go come January. So, take those little victories, right? Especially with our back line.
Absolutely. It's an ever thinning position at the club.
Mm-hmm.
So here's hoping that he comes back as swiftly as possible, especially considering how important he's been for us this season. But anyway, as I kind of alluded to, this is a little bit of a different format. We're actually doing a bit of a spotlight on one of Pedro's pieces, which was called 7 South American Stars for Dortmund to Keep Tabs On. It came out in November on BVB Buzz, and it was a really, really good read, Pedro. So I'm very excited to talk about this. Joey, did you get a chance to see this one as well?
I did, yes. Read it when it first came out, but was able to refresh myself a few days ago. So really, really looking forward to chatting about some of the South American talent and Borussia Dortmund, of course.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get right into it. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual piece itself, Pedro, and Joey obviously as well, I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on a bit of like the South American market and why I guess it's been so hard for Borussia Dortmund to tap into this market in the last few years. Do you guys have any thoughts on as to why that's been the case?
I'm not really sure because we used to be decent in that kind of market. We had a few pieces from Brazil and even from Paraguay. Lucas Barrios was a great piece that we found and was a key player on that club team that contributed with that Bundesliga title. But I don't really know. I think it's a lack of change of mindset and the way we look at the market. I think Borussia Dortmund has been really reliant on European scope. So in that sense, I think we focus way too much on German talent and European talent that sometimes we forget that in the peripheries of the world, there's also really good footballers ready to be developed. And in Asia as well, Dortmund has been doing a decent job. A few years back, we have Kagawa. I think it's the most obvious example. But I think there's a few guys in this list that could really take a step into the team. You see Brighton, there's so many talents like Caicedo, and now they have Barco as well, the left back that has been loaned to Sevilla, who is a great player here for Boca Juniors. They do really good work in scouting from South America because it's not only cheaper to buy those players when they are early ages. So just like we did with Justin Lerma on 16, and he's going to be in Borussia Dortmund in no time in 2026. So if we try to repeat the Justin Lerma model, I'm not saying he's going to be the next big thing in Dortmund, but if we want to try to develop these guys and try to use their talents in pro of the team, I think it's really interesting to look at those kind of markets that are not really obvious for the Europeans, and especially in Brazil, Argentina, they're great footballers here.
I find this a really interesting question because Dortmund does have a pretty rich history of South American players, and especially a few of these players from Brazil. And I've noticed as well, having attended the soccer tournament TST here in North Carolina, that the Borussia Dortmund's traveling legends squad consists frequently of players like Felipe Santana, Didi, Tinga, Evanilson, Lucas Barrios, So these guys are I mean, they didn't just play for Dortmund, but they have maintained a strong connection, and I mean, in some ways, are still employed by Dortmund if they're part of the traveling like the traveling publicity squad essentially. But in terms of recruiting the younger talent, that certainly has been a bit lacking in the last couple of years. And I did look up a quote because I was trying to think of this ahead of the episode, and it's a quote from Jan Kuto, um, pretty soon after he joined on loan, which I believe that whatever his clause was recently
It's
triggered.
been
So
triggered, yeah.
right, so he is going to be a permanent Dortmund player. But he said, "quote It's a dream come true for me. Borussia Dortmund is a special club. Every child in Brazil knows about the greatness of this club, knows the fans, and is fascinated by the yellow wall." And I totally understand that kind of perspective because as a U.S. men's national team fan, I certainly take note of not just a team where one of the U.S. players I like is going, um, but especially when there are multiple players who seem to go through that club or even playing together at the club. So I certainly, from a South American or Brazilian perspective, see the appeal of coming to somewhere like Borussia Dortmund. But I don't know, I suppose, what has been lacking in recent years. And I find Justin Lerma a really fascinating young talent. Um, but, but he's not going to arrive, I believe, until I think it's not this coming summer, but the following summer.
The following. Yeah.
2026, yeah.
So I mean, there's still a whole bunch of development there. I mean, he'll be with Dortmund when he turns 18. But it's also hard to anticipate if this wonderkind is going to remain that in 2 years' time. So as much as I'm hopeful for him, it I don't necessarily see Lerma as like the example for people to follow um, until we see that success from him, and then I would love to see more of those talent come through the pipeline. But speaking to like other Dortmund fans who maybe don't follow quite as closely, they might say Justin who, just because there's the announcement made and then we don't really hear much from him or about him
Very
afterward.
brief, very quick.
Yeah, so
Yeah, yeah.
I'd love somebody from Dortmund to maybe give slightly more regular updates on some of these players who do sign contracts like his, where we got a year and a half till he's actually going to be here. So,
Yeah.
but what do you think, Brian?
I mean, I think you guys obviously hit a big point there. I mean, it is a big heritage thing for Dortmund to have, South American, especially Brazilian players that have made an impact at the club. As to why I guess that pipeline has kind of dried up, the only thing that I could think of when I was kind of mulling this over was something that we've actually talked about on the pod in the past, I believe. And it's basically that, you do have a lot of other teams like Real Madrid, like Barcelona, and Chelsea to some degree as well, really going into that market and upping the price for all these talents for the transfer fees. So a lot of the time you end up getting priced out. And I mean, you see that with the likes of Vitor Roque, Endrick, Kendry Paez. There's a bunch of other players I think that Chelsea signed in the last couple windows that fit that kind of same mold. So I mean, when you're competing with clubs like that who can possibly even overpay for a player, I mean, yeah, that's going to drive the market price up as a whole.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, go ahead, Pedro.
No, no, I was just gonna say, I think you hit an interesting point there, and I mean, those kind of players, they already have like the superstar label on them since they're way younger. So we already know that those guys like Vitor Roque, Hendrick, and Stefan, who has just recently stayed in second in the Brasileirão, the Serie A finished last week, but he was elected rising star, and also according to some media outlets, he was the best player, most valuable player, MVP, depending on which place you search. So in that sense, it's really smart from clubs like Chelsea and Real Madrid to get those guys early on. So before they go to the spotlight and just start destroying the whole league here in Brazil, which is a great competitive league, and we are also dominated the Libertadores Cup for the past 6 years. So Brazil is really a spotlight that Dortmund should be looking into. But I mean, not necessarily going to get those names like Vitor Roque and etc. But at the same time, there's also really good players from like other peripheral areas in those countries. So, for instance, in Brazil, like you get those guys, they all play for big clubs like Hendrick and Estevão. They play for Palmeiras, which is one of the richest and most important clubs in Brazil at the moment here. So, there, of course, the price tag is going to go up. But if you go to other peripheral, like not clubs not in the spotlight, they're not necessarily small clubs, but they are not in the spotlight at the moment. They don't have as many fans as Palmeiras, and that can also happen in Argentina. Like, of course, the price is going to go up for clubs like River Plate and Boca Juniors. But if you go for some examples that I stated here in my piece, like Racing Santander and also Lanús, they're clubs that are not usually in the spotlight, but they still have a lot of talent that not many European clubs are seeing early on. They're only looking for those big price tags and a huge superstar label. So Dortmund should be looking at those guys, and I think Justin Lerma is like the perfect example of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've kind of already mentioned Justin Lerma, so that was kind of going to be my follow up on this. As in to ask you guys, if the Justin Lerma signing is kind of the turning point for Dortmund, in terms of this sort of recruitment, from South America and all of that. But it's interesting because even though we kind of see like you mentioned these bigger teams being cornered by these European powerhouses and all that in terms of getting those players for these high prices, we still do hear sometimes that Dortmund has been around the idea of signing these players for the last maybe couple years now. Maybe obviously like we're talking about not over the last few years, but as of like the last year or two, with like the signing of Lerma, there's been rumors around that too. So for example, Kendry Paez, I believe Dortmund was in some way involved with him as well, and they were also very much interested. But of course, then Chelsea came in and pulled the trigger. But on the flip side of that, you have Justin Lerma, which we were just talking about. It shows that it's possible. So, in that kind of showing that it's possible, do you guys think it is a turning point at this point?
I mean, I don't necessarily think one player would be the turning point, but I think one of the important pieces right now is that I mean, we have Jan Kuto now. In a year and a half's time, Lerma will be there too. So presumably, we'll then have two South American players. And if that can be part of the example of, I mean, something of a pipeline. I mean, Kuto is still pretty young. I think 21, 22. And if he's successful, if Lerma is implemented into the team in a successful way, then I think that can send a strong sign to both recruitment and the players, in some of these leagues and some of these bigger teams, that Dortmund is a potential place to go, especially if they're interested in playing in Europe. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's all, I mean, it's all part of the process, but positive steps.
No, yeah, I agree. I don't think necessarily it's going to be a milestone, especially because, I mean, just because you buy like a young and high ceiling player, it doesn't mean that he's going to reach that ceiling necessarily. I mean, depends on how you develop him and if the manager give him the minutes he needs to develop his football, and eventually like a loan spell could be in place as well, just to help him build that not only physically but also technically and how the game works in Europe. But at the same time, it's a valid attempt to actually get a good player, a really good player who can have a huge ceiling and eventually be sold for even way a lot of money that we have spent, and also contribute a lot on the pitch for Borussia Dortmund. So I think it's a really smart move. Not necessarily Justin Lerma is going to be the guy. I don't want to put that label on him, but I think it's important to try and look to in different markets. I mean, I think here in South America, I think most tournaments, like under 9-year-old tournaments, they are not broadcast. So I don't think they're even under 9-year-old tournaments here in Brazil. Sorry.
Mm.
but I think when those guys get like over 10, 11 years old, there's already tournaments and scouts from all over the world, including Europe and Borussia Dortmund, that are very likely already looking into those players early on, just to see who the next big thing is going to be, and just to pay the price at cheaper first so they can deliver more in the future. I think uh, it's a mindset that Dortmund needs to shift a little more into, because I think it's really important to get those kind of talents early on. I mean, as I said before, Brighton is doing pretty good with that, just selling Enzo Fernandez and Caicedo for 100 million. So, I mean, we can have those kind of contributions on the club and still be a lot of lucrative doing that.
Yeah, and I'm just honestly happy that Dortmund are looking in these different markets now. I think that's a nice change from just that Bundesliga centric outlook. Like you said, like you guys both said, there's a lot of talents out there, and narrowing the scope makes no sense considering there are these players out there that could come in and help. But speaking of recruitment and all of that, before we get into the details of the profile of player that you put into this article, Pedro, I kind of wanted to set a baseline for our discussion, and kind of talk about what positions you guys think specifically that we should be looking at in these upcoming transfer windows, based on what our squad need is right now. And whether there are any players in the squad right now that I guess have kind of shifted that thought process, because I feel like everyone kind of had a very stringent idea of what Dortmund needed to improve coming into this season, and I think that they didn't do that as much as we would have wanted to, because there's very clear gaps in the squad still, as we see it today. So with that being the case, are there specific positions that you guys think that should be focused on? And are there any players that might have shifted that thought process to which positions we should be focused on within the squad before we get to these suggestions of yours, Pedro?
Yeah, no, I just, if Joey doesn't mind, I'm gonna go first.
Yeah.
And by the way, so sorry for the late ring light, because totally forgot he was here. I set it up, but I completely forgot to turn it up. But I hope now
We're
the
not gonna
light is a
judge
little
you.
bit
It's all good.
better. But yeah, what I was gonna say is that I tried to use that same thought process when I was writing the article, because at the same time, I didn't only wanted to focus on the positions that the club needs. I think it's important for us to look for those positions specifically, and also in the long term. For instance, I think two positions that are going to be key for us. I think it's left back and center back. We have in the injury crisis with the center backs, and last night when we're playing the Champions League, Nico Schlotterbeck had a pretty, I mean, it was a scary moment, because when I saw him falling on his feet and he's sprained his ankle, I thought, oh my god, yeah, it's ligament, he's out. We are doomed. But apparently it's not that serious as Joey have said. But it's important to have that depth so we don't face ourselves in a position that have to play like, for instance, Felix Mecha as a center back. So I think center back and left back, especially only because we have Bensebaini on the left side, I think positions we need to invest. We in the midfield, I think Emre Can, it's a question mark at the moment. I think Felix Nmecha has been pretty good and has been developing his football. In my last two player rating articles, he has got a solid 7, because he has been really good, just progressing the ball and carrying the ball forward, and also his physicality has been impressing me. But I think we need a decent guy at a sixth position who can be maybe the next guy if Felix Mecha goes for big money. And also with Gio Reyna, he has been coming in and out from injuries, so I think it's not an urgency, but center attacking midfield could be in place as well. And I think at last, I think also we have to think forward in the transfer market. Malin is probably good to go, as he already alerted to in a few months back. So I think looking for wingers, it's also, I think we should look into, and that's why I put, I think was two examples on my article.
I mean, I think Pedro, you probably touched on the most pressing positions. Well, I really rate highly all of Nico Schlotterbeck, Valdemar Anton, and Niklas Sula. It has become obvious toward the end of this Hinrunde There are too many matches. We don't have enough players. I don't know if the physios don't know what they're doing or what, but um, I don't. I mean, keeping all three of them fit is posing too difficult of a challenge. So it really feels like we need somebody else to be able to slot in there. Um, Beginning the season, I would have said we really need a left back, and I still think we need a left back, but the other part of Brian's question, I think, was has anyone changed their mind about a few things? And Rami Bensebaini is one of those. He gives me a lot more confidence in that left back position than he did last season, than he did maybe in the first couple matches this season. And while he does play right back more often, Julian Rierson can slot into that left back position as kind of an understudy, assuming he's also fit. So left back and center back are definite needs. I find a defensive midfielder would be really beneficial to the squad. I mean, Emre Can has struggled. I give a lot of credit to Felix Mecha in recent weeks. I think he's looked really solid in the position. But I I don't have enough confidence in him yet because I don't think he has been consistent enough for a long enough period of time. Um, and he did have some injury issues last year, so I don't know when those might creep back in. I look at Pascal Gross, who can play as a central defensive midfielder. But Gross is 33, so it's hard to imagine Dortmund's going to be able to count on him much past another season. So I would be interested in some recruitment in that area, and then the striker position or forwards. The striker situation at Dortmund the last few seasons has I don't know if hostile is the right word. It's been very it's like we have a new striker every season. So I didn't expect Fulkrug was going to be a one season striker. Modesta came in for a single season. I mean, Guirassi's here now. That's awesome. But could he leave this summer? I'm not sure. There's just been um, it's been a little I don't know. The strikers come and go a bit more frequently than a lot of other players, I think. So the idea that Dortmund is always scouting for forwards, I just think is a smart move in general. How about you,
Yeah,
Brian?
for sure. Just to your point on Guirassy, I don't know if we have to worry about him too much just because he's already 27, 28, probably on, well, not probably, I think, what is the contract for? 4 years at this point. So I wouldn't be too scared of him leaving, thankfully.
I
So
said the
so
same
that's
thing about Fulkrug, though, but
yeah,
you never
fair.
know.
You know what? You're right with that.
Kills black
Um,
magic.
yeah, I mean, you just never know. I do feel confident though, so let's put that
Fair.
out there. I wouldn't want to see him leave because he's
Me
been
neither.
fantastic. He's been fantastic. But yeah, you guys kind of already hit like all the points that I would have, I guess, on like a Dortmund shopping list for new players. For me, it's definitely center back, definitely left back, and definitely central defensive midfielder. I mean, starting with center back, yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious. We're thin. All three, like you mentioned, Joey, great players. But this is what happens when there's no depth. And then we had Filippo Mane, right? And he's injured as well. So even the academy
Mm.
players aren't even able to slot in. So that's problematic.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
definitely center back is up there for me. Um, Left back or fullback in general as well. You mentioned Benzabaini. He's impressed me a lot this season. I definitely feel more confident about him. And then you have the rumors about Tom Rota possibly having a first refusal clause or something in his contract, not this season, but or not this summer, but next. So I mean, depends on what Dortmund will want to do at that. But at the same time, having someone come in the interim, possibly a talented youngster, there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Um, and then yeah, central defensive midfielder. I mean, You guys mentioned Mecha. He's doing well right now, and props to him for doing so. But midfield in general is eventually going to start looking thin. We haven't seen the best of Marcel Sabitzer, as much as it pains me to say, as big of a fan of his as I am. We haven't seen the Savvy that we wanted to see, and we don't know what's going to happen this summer. We don't know if he turns it around or if Dortmund cut their losses come summer, and then there's one midfielder gone. Gross, as you guys mentioned, is 33. That's going to be a position or a player that's going to be in some way, shape, or form replaced in the not so distant future as well. Emre Can, in my opinion, it's time to move on. And if we can get another defensive midfielder in alongside Nemecha, I think that'd be great. And kind of, I think it was Joey that you alluded to it, that we don't know what's going to happen with Nemecha. After a season, Newcastle might really want to step up their pursuit of him, and he may end up leaving. On the flip side of it, he's been consistent now. We don't know what it's going to look like till the end of the season. So as much props as I'm happy to give him now, I'd like to see what happens to the end of the season as well, to say like, okay, we have our 6 that is 100% going to fill that role as our mainstay going forward. But either way, regardless, if he keeps his form and if he stays, I think we do need a good, a quality player in the 6th position to at least push him to make sure he maintains form. Because, I mean, if we look at the attacking midfield position, we kind of see what happens when a player doesn't have that sort of competition. With Julian Brandt, he hasn't been his best self, and that to a degree also probably has to do with how many games he's had to play. But at least in my opinion, I feel a lot of that has also had to do with a lack of competition with Gio Reyna being injured, and maybe that changes now because Gio's back. But having Marco Reus behind him last season, I think, really did push him to put up the numbers that he did put up. So kind of in the same vein, having that central defensive midfielder there that's either on the same age or a little bit younger, just quality and talented, I think it's important just to have either from like an injury situation standpoint or a competition standpoint. But that being said, Pedro, I think it's time we actually get into some of these suggestions, because I'm really excited for some of them. So, Joey, do you want to go first with your player?
Sure.
You want to talk about?
So the player from your article that kind of stood out to me. I mean, I'm really interested in Brian's pick as well, actually. But the player I'm going with is Federico Redondo. I mean, he's 21, so he's not quite as young as some of the other players in your article, but he's interestingly signed for Inter Miami. So he is playing alongside Lionel Messi and Messi's whole Barca 2014 2.0 in Miami right now. So he's certainly I don't know if he's getting too many minutes at the moment, but he is practicing with and getting some mentorship from some really renowned guys over there. I was watching a little highlight reel from him before the episode, and I was really impressed by some of his just his footwork in general. Sort of these little midfield pivots and turning the ball on a dime. I guess he went to Inter Miami for $8 million, so he wouldn't be. It's hard to say how much they might sell him for. But I also think the MLS is a growing league, and has become more attractive, certainly since Messi has joined the league, and is just growing in general. And I think it's an area that Borussia Dortmund likely has not really looked much at. So I really think that there might be some players within the MLS that have some untapped European potential. So I'd love, Pedro, if you could tell us a little bit more about Redondo.
Oh, well, Redondo is a really good player. I really like his style of play. And if you Google Federico Redondo scouting reports, and that's how not only watching him, but also just because those kind of highlights, they got the best plays, but they don't get the whole picture. So it's always good to go into more depth in those kind of players. But Federico Redondo, he's has a style really similar to Sergio Busquets, and according to various reports that I've read, they all cited Sergio Busquets, if not put Sergio Busquets in the title, like the new Sergio Busquets, because his style really reminds me a little bit of him. Even physically, he's like 187. He's not that strong, like Busquets, but he's quite tall for his position, and I think he's really good at a few things. And for me, is especially spatial awareness. Like he's really aware of his surroundings, so it's really easy for him to make the turn and realize when the press is coming and just uh, give the quick pass, safe pass back, or just try to find another solution and open space for himself. So in that sense, he's really awareness of his own and the other players on the field. And also, like positionally, he's really smart. He knows where to position himself to receive the ball more clearly. So he has the space and the time to find the best solution and progress the ball forward. I mean, he's really good in those kind of areas and really reminds me of Busquets because he's that central element. And even though he haven't played much in that position in Argentina juniors, because in Gabriel Milito's scheme, which was his head coach when he was there at Argentina juniors, he used to play in a 3-4-2-1. So he played mostly in a double pivot, but I believe he can play the single pivot. No doubt. I think he has the talent for that. And I really like him. Even defensively, I have a few numbers for you guys here. Like when he was playing Argentina juniors, like when he is having his defensive duels, he won 77% and average of 7.77 per 90. Also averaging 2.74 interceptions per 90 as 0.95 clearances per 90, and ball recoveries 9.06 ball recoveries per 90. So really impressive defensive numbers. He has not quite had the same defensive stats at MLS. I have here his count report from FBref, and his passing numbers are really impressive, and especially his progressive passes and carries. He has 5.55 progressive passes and 1.37 progressive carries, and bothly with high percentile. So in that sense, I think he's really aware of his surroundings and is really the stereotype of the regista, the guy who can stay in the midfield and make the transition from the defense to the midfield and try to find the pocket of spaces between the lines to retain the ball and make the pass when it needs to go. And so it allows the other players to drift forward in transition. So in that sense, he's really good. A few things that I don't think he's as good as he could be. I think there are things he could get better. I think one of the main things is that sometimes he doesn't have like the audacity to make that pass when he's pressed. So always when a midfielder is pressing him directly, he eventually he decides to go for the easier option just to pass to his center back. So in that sense, at sometimes I wish he would just have more that audacity to make the right turn or just try to find the pass to break the lines, because there's has been some opportunities that he was in that situation, but he chose the easy option. So in that sense, I think he could get that a little bit better. And also his shooting ability, I think he also could be something to be improved. But since he is the pivot, we don't necessarily need him to be Felix Mesha in his shooting abilities. But I think he can get better at that. And I think the last thing, and I probably the most worrying thing for me, and that's most glaring to me, is that he is similar to Busquets in a sense that he's not as quick as a defensive midfielder is in nowadays football. So he's not that fast of a guy. So in that sense, in transition, if he drifts too much into defensive areas, he can be caught off guard on his back shoulder. So in that sense, I think, of course, you can teach speed, but he can definitely, like, he's already smart enough to position himself not to be too exposed. But I think that aspect of his game could be a little bit developed a little bit more. So, but in overall, I think he's a great prospect. He hasn't been played a lot in the MLS. I mean, only the league numbers. He has 16 games. His 16 appearances. He has been hurt since the beginning of the season. I think it was between March and May. So that first semester was not really good for him. He had a bad injury on his knee. So in that sense, he was out for a bit. But in the second semester, he has been quite decent and playing more regular minutes. And it's really for me, the decision to go there really surprised me because I already knew him before. So when he went to Inter Miami, and all due respect to you guys, I know you guys are Americans, but I thought, oh my God, the MLS. What? I mean, I know you want to play with Messi,
I
but I
take no
mean,
offense, Pedro.
I think you have a higher ceiling for that. I mean, all the respect to MLS, I think it's developing as you guys are saying, and it's becoming a more of a entertaining kind of league. Especially if you change the format, not to have those playoffs anymore. Please just go to a normal, like the football that we know. Uh,
Promotion relegation, yeah.
I wish.
Yeah, same. Trust me,
yeah,
I
yeah.
wish.
I think it would benefit a lot, but I mean, overall, I think it's more to like just give that first step into like a more professional league and play more regular minutes with a guy like Messi. I think it's a
Mhm.
unique opportunity, and I don't know, but there's been examples that guy that went to the US and eventually also went to Europe. I think a guy who's probably doing that is Thiago Almada. Like he was a brilliant prospect from Vélez Sarsfield. Then he went to Atlanta United. I think it was Atlanta United. He played a
It was.
while
Hmm.
there in the US, and I was always wondering, oh my God, why did he go there? I think he was bound to Europe since he stepped on the pitch professionally. But I mean, he just then decided to come back to Botafogo, who is now the reigning
Hmm.
champions of the Libertadores. They just won the trophy like 2 weeks ago. Sorry, first time in their history, and he was a key player for them.
Hmm.
And he's likely going to Leon, who is also a club from the same group that Botafogo is owned. I know it's
Okay.
really easy to say like, oh, this is the same owner, so he's bouncing to Brazil and then going back to Europe. But I mean, there are examples of that, and I think Redondo has the ceiling to develop in Europe as well. He's young; he's turning 22 in the beginning of January next year. So I think in that sense, it's still young, and I think he already had enough minutes to at least prove himself and to be an option to Sahim now, like as a center defensive midfield with the aside to Felix Macha and Richard. But great choice, Joey. I really had fun with Redondo, and hopefully he comes to Dortmund.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, he taught me more than I knew about him, so I'm gonna look out for that name, and I hope he comes to Dortmund too.
Mm, hopefully.
Very cool. So I guess you guys have kind of already answered my follow-up question, which was going to be whether you guys think, or Pedro in particular, if you think that he's ready for the jump to the Bundesliga. So you're saying at this point he's good to go. He can come in and kind of already be a squad player for Nuri Sahin and Dortmund. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it's also kind of obvious that he's not gonna play in there under teams like he's turning 22, so he doesn't even have the legal age to be there. He needs to be in the professional team, but I think he's the guy who can slot in, not to be the first choice immediately, but I think he can be a guy who like is a solid option like Philip Oman. I think would be a solid option if he would have more minutes. Not necessarily he wouldn't make mistakes. I think it's part of the process that he would make mistakes, but I think he has enough of uh, football IQ and raw talent to show that he's capable of playing in this league. I know it's pretty physical, but I think he can develop that side of him, and I think he has already have been developing that side in the US as well. So in that sense, I think so. Of course, the way Felix and Matcha is playing right now, I don't think he would start immediately, but I think it would be an interesting prospect. Even though he's a little bit older, I usually try to go for under 19 kind of players when I do this list. But it was a little bit of a personal choice for me, and also think he's not that old, and I think he can still make a splash in Europe.
So the variety in your article is one of the things I really liked about it because it was a good range from, I mean, guys like Redondo who might be ready to make the move, all the way to probably the player we're next going to talk about next, who's more of a prospect. So it just kind of keeps things fresh and yeah, good read. If you haven't read it, go read Pedro's article.
Thanks, man.
Well, for sure, we'll have it in the link where we post the video as well to make sure that people have eyes on it. But as Joey alluded to, I wanted to move on to the next player that I wanted to talk about. And Pedro, you're gonna have to make sure I'm pronouncing this right. So, player that I was thinking of is Jair Cunha. Is that correct?
Close enough, man.
What is the pronunciation?
Jair Cunha.
Jair Cunha. Okay, cool. There we go. So I was close. All right, that's good enough. That's good enough. I won't beat myself up too much about it. But as mentioned, center back, very important
Hmm.
position for us right now. A position of dire need. And when I say dire, that is not an exaggeration because it's dire. It's bad. So Santos player. So obviously, an academy and a club that a lot of fans of European football would have heard of as well. Right now in Serie B, correct?
Yeah, we just Santos had just qualified for Serie A. It was the first time they got relegated in their history, and in
Uh huh.
2025 they're gonna play Serie A football.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, good to know. Glad to hear they're back up on the bounce. But going back to Cunha himself, so my understanding, player worth 5 million euros, contract around until December 2026. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what sort of drew you to this player, Pedro?
Well, I'm kind of a little bit, I'm not gonna say biased, but I'm a little bit lighthearted when I talk about Jair because I don't try to hide from anyone. It's in my Twitter bio. I'm a Santos fan. So I have
There
been
you go.
following Jair, yeah, since the youth 19 teams at Santos. And I remember like last year and the year before, I remember watching him in Copa São Paulo, which is the tournament that opens up the season in Brazil. Like it's a for young players, like under 19 tournaments, and all the teams from Brazil. I think it's more than 100 teams that play all across São Paulo for the title. And it's usually when the Brazilian fans from their respective teams have the opportunity to have a first glance of those kind of talents and just to have an idea of what player he can be. And he has impressed me since day one. He's the kind of like of a prototype of a modern center back. Like he's tall, he has a his fast pace. He is so good on the ball, like his ball progression and the way he's cool enough to find the right passes between the lines for me has always been a differentiation to me because you don't expect a guy that young to be that cool with the ball in his feet and try to find those kind of passes and long balls as well. Yeah, he has been quite decent in the U19s. And I don't know, it's just for me a perfect prospect for Europe. I mean, even recently there has been an article in one of the major media conglomerates here, and there has been rumored that Atalanta would be willing to pay 20 million euros for him. So you would see that he was already a prospect that has caught eyes from all over Europe as well. He almost also went to Porto. Santos got a proposal from Porto for him to leave in the middle of the Serie B this year, but eventually he was rejected. But Porto is still in the game. They're probably going to try to sign him when the transfer market opens on the turn of the year. But and honestly, I'm not really optimistic about sticking with him with one more season. But I think if he leaves, I think Dortmund should go into him immediately. I don't think he necessarily we go in and just directly go to the starting 11. Like I think Philip Omano is more ready for that because Jair, as much as he's really good on the ball, especially in positionings and especially during set pieces, those are the kind of the moments that I wish he had a better sense of spatial awareness when especially when he's defending set pieces and sometimes in long balls. So in that sense, I think that's part of his game he could get a little bit better. But I mean, overall, he's a great prospect, and that's no coincidence that so many uh, great clubs like Atalanta and Porto, who had great scouting uh, teams, and Porto has been a team that has been scouting a lot of diamonds in South America for years. They do that. They buy South America, they make them into ready players for Europe, and then they sell for 100 million. So, in that sense, I think it's really important that we should be prospects. Sorry, that we should really look into. And as much as that might sound personal, he's a guy that really speaks to me. Like he's one of the most exciting center back prospects that I have seen on my team and in Brazilian football. I think the record transfer now is for Beraldo for PSG. I think it was around 20 million euros or a little bit less than that. But I think you can surpass him not only on the transfer numbers, but also on the pitch if he's rightfully developed. I think Atalanta might be a good destination to him, especially with their manager, which I'm a big fan of. And I mean, he should have had more minutes. He hasn't played a lot, especially because he had a serious injury in the beginning of 2023. So he didn't play much of the year. He only came back by the end of the campaign when Santos was relegated to Serie B, and then they put him in the last game of the season where we were relegated. Great squad plenty, Santos. But overall, I think it's a great guy, great player, and I think he would be a bright star in Dortmund if we eventually sign him.
For sure. And I mean, kind of a little bit of like what you mentioned about him, like the model of the modern center back, I feel is very important these days, especially when it comes to ball progression, and stuff like that. And from what the little that I've read about him as well, on top of what you've already said, is that he's definitely able to play that ball playing center back role, which obviously is very important in the game these days to be able to play out from the back. And we also notice from how Dortmund like to play, or rather, not even how they like to play, the skills that the center backs that we have now, so like Sula, Anton, and Schlotterbeck, all are very much ball progressors and are able to play, those progressive passes up, uh, direct long balls and all of that stuff. And it's not just haphazard balls up. They're very much, direct and very good at finding their target. So I think those are all skills that are very important to have. I would definitely hope to hear that, if we do end up signing him, that he does work on that, um, that I believe you were talking about dealing with like set pieces and long balls and stuff like that, on the opposite end. So when we're defending them, I think that'll be very important to have him, get better at before he becomes a part of the first team setup, if he were to join. Because I believe we have had problems with that in the past. So, we definitely wouldn't want to kind of put that into the lineup as well. But overall, a very, very exciting prospect, I think, and definitely a player I'd like to see come to
Yeah,
Dortmund as
yeah.
well.
And also another thing I forgot to mention, he's not necessarily the bulkiest guy. So he's very tall, but at the same time he's really skinny. So in that
Hmm.
sense, he would need to bulk up a little bit, go to
Yeah,
the gym directly, go
right.
instead of signing contract, go straight to the gym, go pull some weights, try
Get
to
him a
get
gym
some more
membership.
muscle mass. Yeah, and but overall, it's just great. I don't think he'll be ready to play or fit right in like Filippo Mane. And of course, I think Dortmund
Hmm.
right now would be looking for a more glaring need and a guy who would be ready to play now. But I mean, he would be great for a future. Great. I mean, I think he bulked up a little bit and cleaned those aspects of his game that I just mentioned. Wow, what a center back.
No, very, very, very exciting prospect. So Pedro, I wanted to ask: is there a specific player off of this list that you wanted to bring to our attention? Because we're talking about the ones that we thought were interesting. Which was one that kind of like you really wanted to talk about?
I mean, there's a few. I'm gonna mention a few names because I think they are also options that we might look into the
For
future.
sure.
Go
I
for it.
think I mentioned on my list Soler from Lanús, which is a great offensive weapon from the left side. He's a left back. He is kind of like the Guerrero archetype, and I think we will be looking for the prototype even in Matson. And I think he basically has the same like way of playing as those two guys, and he's a great weapon. But I think there's other guys, even from Santos. There is our young left back that just signed an extension. Souza has been in the youth Brazilian teams like since he was way younger, a exciting prospect, and I have heard from him since he was way younger than his like current playing age, to the step that he would play for professionally. And in Santos, we really depend on our youngsters because we don't have that much of a spotlight. We are not located in São Paulo. We are located in a city like 100 kilometers from São Paulo. Sorry, a little bit less than that, but it's roughly an hour and a half drive from São Paulo. So in that sense, he doesn't have that much of attention. In like Santos doesn't have that much of attention, like and especially in money wise. So we need those academy players to thrive. And in that sense, Souza is such an incredible prospect as well. Great offensively, delivers some great crosses, and he's gonna be on the radar of a lot of European teams in the future. There is this guy from São Paulo called William Gomez, who has been playing recently in the last few matches of the Brasileirão. He got a few chances with, a few chances with the, I think he's Argentine, the manager Zubeldia, and he's an exciting winger prospect who can also play as a left midfielder, that kind of role. I thought about putting him on the list, but I think I'm gonna dive into his profile a little more in the future, but that's a guy to keep your eyes on. And there's also a guy in Corinthians called Mateus Bidon, which was a guy I was not that aware of, but until recently when he started to play in the starting 11 of Corinthians. And a lot of Corinthians fans who are my friends and my family members told me, oh, no, Mateus Bidon is really good. And I started looking into him and paying more attention to his football. And that's like the left footed kind of center midfield that Dortmund has been looking into the future, like the new, I'm not going to say the new Sahin, but definitely a guy that could fit that description. Maybe not as much talent as Sahin had back in the day, but I mean, he's a interesting prospect as well. So a few options there for you guys, but maybe I'll keep some of those names in my safe so I can use in the list in the future, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely be looking forward to more in-depth articles from you on those, and hopefully we can actually start seeing some rumors connect these players to Dortmund, and we can kind of see that little pipeline starting to form. And yeah, we can see some of these transfers come to fruition. I think it'd be really exciting.
Yeah, hopefully. Now, there's so many great talents in South America, and it's way closer to me because I'm from here. But that's really when you start looking into those players and you really realize they have a lot of talent. But in Brazil here, we don't have that much of a structure like the European clubs have. So I think these guys, they sometimes they like a little bit tactically and also physically a few times, especially because they leave like Brazil, Argentina, and all those countries really young. But in that sense, we have really like skillful players. I think we have been developing a lot of wingers with those kind of guys like Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr. But a lot of those guys could also benefit of playing in the middle. I think we are, and we even can even see that in the Brazilian national team. We don't have many attacking midfielders with the same talent as we used to have. And even guys like Rodrigo can also benefit a lot playing in the middle. Stefan, who is going to Chelsea, I think personally that he would benefit a lot playing in those middle areas like the Cole Palmer kind of model. But a lot of exciting prospects. I'm thinking about doing another list. Uh, Not that long from now. Of course, we are just turning in 2025, but there's definitely going to be more content for you guys.
That
Great to
sounds
hear.
good. All right then. Well, thank you very much, Pedro, for giving us some insight on all these players. Super exciting to read for anyone who hasn't read it yet. Highly recommend. In case you want a more in-depth look at any of them or any of the players that we didn't mention today that are on the list. Joey, do you have any final thoughts?
Uh, not not a whole lot. I'm glad that you touched a little bit on. I think it was Julio Soler, because I think he sounds like a pretty promising prospect as well.
No, no, he's great. He played basically the whole campaign for the Olympics for Argentina this year as a
That's
starter.
awesome.
So that's already a pretty exciting asset to have going into the European football.
And if there could be a solid left back to help push Ben Smaini, that's always welcome as well.
Yeah. Also because we need that offensive prototype that
Hmm.
Bitsabai needs, not necessarily. He's a good player, but we kind of like we just have with Young Colton and Ryerson, like two opposites of the same coin. Don't think that's the best uh, metaphor that I wanted to
I
use,
know what you
but I think
mean.
you guys get it. Yeah. But
Yeah, we get it. We get it.
anyway,
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, super fun episode as always, guys. Thank you very much for joining me. Is there anything you guys want to plug?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on X. It's J Lamson Meyer. Also on Blueski now, or is it Blue Sky? I'm not sure. You can find me there
This
through
guy.
through the Dortmund Dispatch page, writing for Fear the Wall and BVB Buzz when I can. Article from yesterday. It's a few takeaways from the Champions League game, and Pedro's got your player ratings. I've got your takeaways.
yeah. Spoiler alert: Schlotterbeck is the best player that was on the pitch yesterday, but.
Anything else you want to plug, Pedro?
Yeah, of course. So you guys can follow me on @Del_Pedro 23. as usual, you can read my articles on BBB Buzz, and hopefully I can have more of this list for you guys. That's the kind of content that I really dig, and it's so interesting to just to go into those players and see what they can deliver to Borussia Dortmund and football in general. But it was nice to have this episode about me, and thank you, and I see you guys next time.
Yeah, thanks for writing that article, Pedro. It's been a fun
Thank
one.
you.
You do a great job with it, Pedro. So thank you very much for that. But yeah, just follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Dortmund Dispatch is basically everywhere. Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram. I promise Instagram will be a bit more active in the near future. I keep promising that, but I will get on it. So we're working.
We believe you. We believe you. Don't worry.
We're working on some content, so it'll be on there. But thank you very much for all our listeners for joining us. Have a good night.
Jadon Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce out. Another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond
Jetzt
compare.
kommt das Wunder von Dortmund. Foulspiel von Inzo an Götze.
Needs to lay it off. We're going to shot away. Oh, what a